morning, everybody. This is your host of the RW, Brandon Macy. So glad to have you on with us today. And I have one of my very good friends that just celebrated a birthday yesterday, PJ Dial. So glad to have you on with us today. PJ Dial is not only one of my longtime friends, probably I would consider him one of my best friends. And I mean, we're not just coming out with that on the podcast. Like, we've talked about that before, but no, one of my best friends, and we go way back, but he is also the director of the men's group here at Royalwood Men. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that today because there's some really exciting things that have transpired recently. And, you know, you've kind of laid out a vision for the men. And I'm really excited to see that and just see what God is doing in the men's group, because, and me and you have talked about this a lot, you know, families are led by strong fathers.
That's right.
And it's definitely in our day and age something that I feel like everything is trying to pull fathers or peel fathers away from their families and away from that role.
Sure.
And so I'm excited to see focus back on that and guys getting excited about it. And one of the things that we saw is when you and I were facilitating the men's circle, is it really came to life there. It was like, we need, like, I needed it.
Right.
But you were able to see other guys that you pass every day at the church that you look at and you're saying, hey, this guy's a strong guy. Hey, I'm looking up to that guy. And then we're sitting there in a circle talking about, man, I'm having these struggles.
That's right.
Here's things that I'm going through. So I'm really excited about that. So tell a little bit about how we got to where we are now and kind of your vision to help out with the Royalwood Men.
Yeah, so glad to be on the podcast. I'm in a swivel chair, so that means I'm going to move. So I'm hoping I'm not making the viewer dizzy. But, you know, the first, I guess, mandate for the men's ministry when I was asked to, hey, look, get involved here, was to support the functions and the activities at Royalwood.
Right.
So we jumped in. There were some teams already established, and we got behind every event from the backpack giveaway to baptism Sundays, you name it. Our men began to get behind the scenes. They were always there, but we needed more organized efforts to get behind the scenes. And so we did that, and it was awesome. And through that, the men's circle started coming on strong. And like you said, we started seeing the need for, you know, some true connection. And so I began to pray about, you know, when you're tasked with a ministry at Royalwood Church, you know, for me, it's a burden of like, hey, this has to be legit. It has to be real.
Right.
And so that drove me for a little bit. But then when I began to really connect with our men on a deep level, that began to drive me. Like, these guys need it.
Right.
Yes, it needs to be done excellent, but our men need connections. And so I began to pray and ask the Lord to give me the direction. Some of our men's leaders were transitioning to other roles, and I knew that the Lord started showing me men that love to connect.
Right.
And traditionally, a man will say, I don't want to be involved because I'm not a minister.
Right.
I don't want to be a leader. Right. I don't have time.
It's the best place for you.
That's right. That's right. And that's not what we need. Our church has plenty of ministers.
Right.
What we need is men that like to connect and build a relationship with other men. So I think we did a great job of getting our men to the point of the fist bump. The next level was like, how do we get the hearts to bump?
Yeah.
You know, you alluded to it. We've had in circles where men would begin to say, look, this is something I struggle in my life.
Yeah.
And what it would do, it would create an opportunity for someone else to say, hey, me too, or I struggle with this, or I have this question. And I realized when Jesus said, confess your faults one to another, or the Bible said, confess your faults, it's not just accountability.
Right.
But actually you create freedom by doing that. You tear down a wall for someone to say, me too. And we've seen that so many times.
Well, and I think you can't really get over that hump or thing that you're facing until you come out and say, I've got a problem with this.
That's right.
You know, one of the things that that they do in like AA and stuff like that is they always, the first thing is you got to admit that you have a problem.
That's right.
So you got to come out and say, I have a problem with alcohol, or I have a problem with drugs, or whatever it is. And so there is a power in saying, I've got this issue. I'm bringing it out. I'm bringing it out from under the shadow of darkness.
Right.
And saying, this is something that I face. And what we quickly realize, I think, is that we're all facing these same battles. This is not like, the problem is that as men, we have a hard time being transparent with that and saying, or admitting that we have weaknesses, admitting that we have faults, admitting that we fight these things and that we have these battles. But there is power not only in the individual saying, this is something that I'm fighting, but then everybody else goes, oh, I'm not the only one.
That's right.
And that's paramount, because you know this, we go through life a lot of times, I think, fighting things and going through things. And you and I recently talked about this with dads who've been divorced.
Right.
Is we're fighting these things and we're like, I'm the only one that's going through this, until you open up to somebody, and then somebody else, and then somebody else. And then you realize this is a widespread thing. These people are battling these things on a daily basis and living with these burdens and hang-ups and challenges. And there's strength in numbers when you come out and say, man, well, let's get together. Somebody that we've talked about, and I don't think they would care if I said their name, but I'm not going to, just in case, that has had struggles through their divorce. He and I have been able to connect on a completely different level, and I've been able to say, hey, man, I'm praying for you and your kids today. He's been able to write me and go, man, I'm praying for you today.
Right.
Hope your kids are doing well. That means a lot, man. And before, it was like, okay, I guess I'll just carry this all by myself.
Yeah, when that individual actually came to me, he's got such a burden for it because he struggled so much with his divorce. It's going to sound terrible saying it out loud, but I was kind of like, I don't know if there's a space for that. But then I just stopped and turned around and started looking at our men, and we have so many men who are divorced.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
Yeah.
Probably the furthest thing from it. So I began to really just take a step back, and I remember an episode, with you going through your divorce that really stood with me. I mean, it's real. It's real day-to-day issues, and there's seemingly not a lot of content out there, a lot of support for that.
Sure.
And so we have a large group of men who need that, whether they've been divorced 1 year or 10 years.
Yeah.
They need that. There's things break in those moments. Families break, hearts break, and they're just sitting there left unmended.
Right.
No way to deal with it. And so absolutely we need to find a space for our guys to get together, whether you've been divorced or whatever you struggle with, and share and connect. It has empowered me. I mean, I had that in my own life where I began to say, look, I've got some things.
Right.
I started sharing them with my wife, which a lot of counselors will say, I don't recommend that right away. She's my best friend, and so we began to just talk about some things, and she was like, wow, I never knew. And
right.
But it created this freedom for me to go into the small groups, and I know guys, because I am one, and they don't want to do it.
Right. And
so I just made myself vulnerable, and I'm not looking for a badge here, but I began to share, hey, look, and it was crazy. In the same circle where I did it the first time,
right,
guys began to say, I started getting text, and it just makes us human.
Right.
All we're doing is defeating the voice of Satan. We're silencing that with our own voice of confession, because he just holds us under, right, and shame's not of God.
Well, and one of the I saw this quote one time, have no idea who made it, but the quote was, the greatest men in the Bible at the end of the day were just men.
That's right.
And I think we forget that sometimes. We look to David's and we know that these guys made huge mistakes. I mean, massive mistakes. But I think sometimes we look at them and go, well, but they overcame that because they were a special guy. And it's like, no, they weren't. They were just a guy like we are.
That's right.
That God had something for them to do. the thing is that God has something for all of us to do too.
That's right.
And so we're in that same boat. So we either have to learn how to persevere, push through those things, overcome those battles. I mean, it was David that said, lion, bear, now the Philistine,
That's
right? We have to be able to do that in our own lives. Go, well, I made it through this. I made it through this. Now I can make it through this. But not only that, why don't I talk about how these things happened? And even, what I've learned is I've done this with myself, but I've also talked to other people and been able to say, the path that you're on, I've been on it. You're on the third step. I've been to the edge of that path, and you need to turn around right now.
Yes.
Trust me, because here's what you got coming, and it's coming. And now whether or not people take that, advice or not is up to them. But I'm saying, I think when we've gone through things, that it's not just good to go through things, but to also talk to somebody else and go, here's how I got to this place. Because nobody ever gets to a failure or, falls in battle or whatever overnight. There's usually a progression of weakness that begins to start.
Right.
And then it happens. But, these things that have been created through the men's ministry have given an avenue for those kind of talks to take place in front of people sometimes. Sometimes a guy will say, hey, can I talk to you later?
Right.
But all of those things are giving people the ability to be accountable, the ability to know that I'm not an isolated, situation out here, and know that we have support. I mean, it's the strength of the church that helps us make it through. It's responsibilities that we have at times that make me go, I do have to get up this morning. I do have to do this. It's the same thing with your kids. You're like, I'm not living for me. I'm living for my boys, my daughter, and that sort of thing. And I feel like the men's group gives even another layer to that. And to me, that's why it's just it's so important.
I listened to a podcast the other day. It's called Reflections. So the Bible Project podcast and their sister podcast Reflections, could not recommend them more. They were talking about God doesn't rescue from anything. He rescues you for something.
That's good.
And so a lot of times we are rescued from something and we just kind of say, okay, I'm rescued, and we stay there. Yeah. And it used the example of he brought the people of Israel out of Egypt, and they came to the Mount of God, and he said, I've rescued you from captivity. Now I'm going to make you a nation of priests. And if you think about the context of a priest is an intermediary, a conduit, the face of a god.
Right.
Especially in those days.
Yeah.
If you were a Moabite, didn't matter. There was a priest, and he was basically the man. So he said, I'm going to make you a nation of that. Well, priest has to have people. And what God was saying is, Israel, I'm pulling you out and I'm making you separate, but it's for the world.
Right.
But they never got that.
Yeah.
They never understood that. They went far right on I'm separate, and don't touch the unclean thing. Don't mingle in that way. Don't marry in that way. But the original message was, I'm going to make you a nation of priests.
Yeah, that's good.
And in Christianity, what do? We talk about holiness, and we kind of adopt almost the same kind of thing. And holiness also means the nature of God.
Yeah.
And what was Jesus? He was in the life of the sinner.
Right.
He went up to Zacchaeus. This jumped in my mind this morning and said, come down. I want to go to your house. He invited himself over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Zacchaeus, a couple hours later, says, I give half to the poor. If I've ever wronged anybody, I want to make it right.
Yeah.
But he injected himself. We're talking about vaccines a lot.
Right.
But that's what holiness is. It's a vaccine. That's what I bring that all around to. That's what the men need to be.
Yeah.
The men of God, starting with me. It's not just a list of duties and roles and be a good dad, be a good husband, follow the rules. A holy man of God, a royal priest, means I'm going into the world and injecting myself. But before we can do that, there's things we got to deal with.
Sure.
Let me rephrase that. Simultaneously, we can do that.
Right.
We don't have to get it all fixed right, because it never gets fixed
Yeah.
at first, and then I do this.
Well, and I think that's a common misconception with men too. You know, I've talked to guys where they're like, you know what, I'll be at church, but I got to get some things. And it's like, it doesn't work that way.
No.
You know, when you come to Jesus, then he fixes you. You haven't been successful fixing yourself this whole time.
That's right.
So quit trying to do it on your own. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is, I know there's some really exciting things coming up. We've got a men's worship night that's
Yes.
coming up in like May, right?
That's right.
We've got a camping trip
That's right.
that's coming up. What's the date on that?
March 26th.
March the 26th. Location on that yet, or that's still in the works?
I'll know a couple of days. I've got
Okay.
a couple of options
Okay.
for group camping.
Okay.
Camping
cool.
is crazy right now.
Yeah,
You can't
it
find
is.
spots anywhere.
It is crazy.
So
Um,
we'll be rolling out registration links for that in a day.
Cool. And that'll always, as always, guys, those things will be under the events tab on the website, or you can go on your app that I know all of you have downloaded, and you can do it there. But the other thing is, I mean, we've got some other exciting events. We got a beach fishing night that
Prayer
I'm pumped
breakfast.
about. Prayer breakfast with tacos, hopefully.
That's
I'm
right.
going to go ahead and interject that.
That's right. Always tacos.
So a lot of cool stuff happening, and that is just the group as a whole. That doesn't include the things that are going to happen within the 6 groups, right? Because
right.
we now have it split up into 6 teams. We've all got team captains. I'm one of those team captains.
That's right.
Excited to be involved in it. And the cool thing is we had a draft night, just like you would for like,
Any major league
yes,
team.
Thank
Yeah.
you. But like for fantasy football, that sort of thing.
That's right.
So we had a draft night where we all got to draft our team, and it was a lot of fun. And the cool thing about it too was getting to see the guys that the conversations that took place within that draft night, where we were like, you know, some of us were like, hey, you should pick this guy because I think he would be good with your group.
That's right.
And then some guys were like, I'm going to pick this guy because I don't know him and I'd like to get to know him
That's
better. I told you, I was like, I put my group together of like, what group of guys would I never put in a room together? And that's the guys that I tried to, because I didn't want to make a group of a bunch of friends. It was like, I wanted to make a group of guys that all had different things that they could feed into the group, that maybe they would never hang out in a regular setting, but now we're going to have the opportunity for them to hang out in a setting. And so I was excited to see that and like hear the feedback from the other guys and just feel the energy around and the excitement around being able to do this and us pulling together, you know?
Yeah, it was really cool. I saw a lot of what I knew was in the teams leaders that I asked to be a part of it. I saw they kind of confirmed that, you know,
Yeah.
their heart was saying, hey, that guy really didn't come anymore. I want him.
Yeah.
I want to draw him in. And so, and you know, the reality is I looked at it from a business perspective too. Traditionally, they're built that here is your team. And so even though you love men, you care about men, can you work? You know, there needs to be
Yeah.
an element of, hey, I need to have a few guys on here that I know are going to work.
Right.
And can I work well with them?
Sure.
But at the end of the day, they're vested. It's their team now, not one they've been given. It's their unit, their group of guys to, you know, minister to, not to scare, but connect with. These guys we have will text and connect and reach out and just stay in tune. We need it so desperate.
We do.
When I went through I told you guys this, but just going through the list of men who've come through our church, I was like, oh my Lord, what happened to this guy? What about this guy? And a lot of it had to do with COVID, but there wasn't a good system for men to really stay connected. So I think we have the right people in place. I'm really, really excited.
Well, and you know, we have so many people and guests coming in constantly that we want to make sure that we're turning these guests into part of the family. You know, we want to make sure that we're getting them adopted
Yes.
as quickly as possible, and make sure that no one slips through the cracks. No matter, you know, if they're outgoing, no matter if they're quiet, no matter what their characteristics are. We want to make sure that we get them plugged in, and this is the best way to do it.
Yeah, nobody left behind.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in the Connect last week, we had a couple. One of the younger men in the Connect, we were praying at the end, and he said, "Hey, pray for me. I've been struggling with some loneliness." And I said, "Hey, thank you for doing that. I mean, just confessing that for a man is big." Well, another couple said, "Well, since he said it, and here it goes, he tore down a wall."
Yeah.
And she began to cry. And she said, "We've been coming here for a while. We love it. We're involved, but we don't have friends."
Yeah.
And that, like, my heart broke.
Yeah.
Right there and I thought, wait a second, we are Roywood. How can someone feel that way? And I quickly turned the page on guilt, and I was thankful for the opportunity because God brought that moment to light. And now, now we know, hey, look, here's maybe a gap in the process. However this happened. But this couple, they're super quiet. Right. They just go about their own business, and they love coming here. But they were having problems building relationships outside of that.
Yeah.
And so I love when God points those moments out.
Sure.
I think when he knows we want that, he's going to bring those to light. And no one can come here and feel that way.
Absolutely not.
Right. That's the mission.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, again, we have a ladies ministry, also men's ministry. And I think with getting these things set up and actively communicating with people and getting a system of accountability and being able to, you've tasked team leaders with saying, hey, what is your level of involvement from your team? Like if you've got 20 guys on your team, how many of those guys are active?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we're working on is bringing guys that are maybe not active and getting them active somehow, getting them plugged in, getting them taking ownership, not only of, themselves, but of our responsibility here at the church and as Christians. And I think, again, the level of accountability is going to make a huge difference in Royalwood as a whole, because as Royalwood continues to grow, as there Sunday, I was on the platform and I was looking out going, I feel like I don't know half the people here. I
do not.
It's just, we've got so many guests coming. We've got so many people that, we've got, an incredible number of first-time guests every month. And it's like, when you look at it sometimes from the platform, it's like, this is too big.
Right.
You've got to break it down into bite-sized pieces. And I think that's one of the great things about, this launching in the level that we're launching it, because I think it's going to help get more stickability with people and them feeling like they're plugged in and feeling like they're important. It breaks my heart that anybody would say, oh yeah, man, we're just not, because you're trying to do that. But, I told somebody this the other day, I said, your arms are only so big. You can only wrap your arms around so many people. Over 100 men is way too big a task for one guy.
Right.
You can't do that on your own. It's just impossible. So I think having it this way is going to help us to be able to break it down and to be able to get people involved. And I'm excited about it, man. It's going to be awesome.
You fall into your life, you celebrate output.
Yeah.
Right. Not the outcome. And so that's what we want to do.
Absolutely.
It's just activate and celebrate and activate and celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're active, we're winning.
Yeah.
We're moving forward. If people are coming and feeling a part of something, they get into a spot where they can serve and feel useful.
Right.
That message just gets compounded and compounded. And so, yeah, I'm super excited. I'm very glad to be talking about it and sharing what we're doing. If you're a man in Royalwood Church and you're not involved, you should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not involved, I can tell you right now, you're struggling feeling useful.
Yeah.
Because the thing we were designed to do is to serve God.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people like to say to worship him, but he also created Adam and Eve for his pleasure and then gave them the garden and made them stewards of it.
Right.
We're designed to work.
Right.
My wife helped me understand this because I would feel guilty about how much I work. And I did work too much. But at the end of the day, if you're not doing something useful that's eternal, you're going to have those feelings.
Absolutely.
And that's what men get caught up in, that hamster wheel. So if you're having those feelings today, it's because you're not serving in the right place.
Well, and I want you to tell everybody that's watching this where they can connect if they're not connected with a men's team right now. Because I know we've got Instagram now, Facebook now. So how can they do that? How's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, the Facebook page is called Roywood Men's Ministry. And then we have Instagram, Roywood Men, and Twitter at Roywood Men. So they're pretty easy. And from that, that's how we're really going to take the fist bump and move it to the heart pump by just giving and delivering some content to them from some of our people. We got a lot of amazing people that have a lot of good things to say, but then also just sharing resources. I think I've touted All Pro Dad. If you're a dad, you should be following All Pro Dad. But
they've got amazing stuff.
Amazing stuff.
Now, what if they just wanted to reach out to you personally? What's the best email address for them to do that at? That's probably the best way, right?
Yes, that is. So it's Paul James Dial, Dial, at gmail.com.
Awesome.
PJ Dial was taken. PJ Dial was taken. PJ76 was taken.
So he had to go ahead and spell his whole name out, guys.
That's my full name, if you ever wondered. It's Paul James Dial.
Well, let me say this. First of all, thank you to what you're doing, because what you're doing is extremely important. I'm very blessed and honored to be able to play a very small part in that. But I'm excited about it. I'm excited about seeing the future and what happens with the Roywood Men and how that trickles into every aspect of the church, because it will. When you have strong, godly fathers, it affects every part of the family unit.
Right.
Thus, affecting the entire church.
That's right.
So I'm excited about that. If you are, again, watching this and you want to be a part of the Roywood ministry, we invite you to do that.
Yes.
We want you to be a part. If you have, slipped through the cracks or feel like you're not plugged in the way that you need to be, please reach out
to me.
Yeah, to PJ.
Please.
Any way that you can reach out, because we want you to be able to do that. Thank you, man, for taking time to come on the podcast. Thank every one of you for watching the podcast. Thank you for your support. And you know what? If you're a man and you see this, why don't you share it with somebody?
Absolutely.
And then they can be encouraged by it, and then they can get involved in being a part of the Roywood Men's Ministry as well. Have a great week, everybody.